Jesse Marsch arrived to coach the Canadian men's national soccer team at a critical juncture. It was less than 2 years after they'd reached the World Cup in Qatar, a historic high for Canada. But in the interim, the magic of that qualifying campaign seemed to disappear. Results on the pitch were disappointing, and there were constant complaints about the stewardship and financial state of the Canadian Soccer Association. When John Herdman abruptly quit in the summer of 2023, 3 years before Canada was set to co-host the World Cup for the first time, there was no obvious successor. And many questioned whether Canada even had the resources to attract a world-class coach. Enter Marsch, like a whirlwind. With just one brief training camp under his belt, he led Canada into 2 friendlies against world powers, the Netherlands and France, and then immediately into the Copa America, where, among others, world champion Argentina lay in wait. Everyone in soccer thought that Canada was about to endure a painful lesson in the true hierarchy of the world game. Instead, they played with a new confidence. They thrived against daunting odds, and by the time they exited the Copa with a 4th-place finish just minutes away from a spot on the podium, Marsch was hailed as a miracle worker. Though he has coached successfully in Europe, Marsch is a distinctly American soccer personality, part of the same wave that produced the 1994 World Cup in the United States and spurred the formation of Major League Soccer, where Marsch enjoyed a successful playing career before moving into coaching. He brings some of that American swagger to the table, and it's clearly rubbed off on his players. We met Jesse in downtown Toronto right after a team practice. All right, we're all good? Yeah, and we may wander all over the place in this conversation. If that's okay by you, but
no worries.
Yeah, feel free to extrapolate if you want
to.
Okay. Anyway, very good to see you today, Jesse. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I was in Dallas in March at that Trinidad match. So the match that Canada needed to win to get into the Copa. I was working pitch side with a cameraman watching it, and it came at the heels of a tough year for Canada, obviously, coming off, and it was not an encouraging match. It didn't feel good. And kind of looking ahead, you had the 2 really tough friendlies that would be announced, the toughest 2 friendlies in Canadian history, plus the Copa, first time, obviously with Argentina in the group. Like it didn't feel like a necessarily bright shining moment was coming. And then you weren't hired till May.
Yeah.
And then in June it looked like a completely different side.
Yeah.
Playing a completely different style. You hardly knew the guys. And obviously the Copa was a stunning success, I think, from a Canadian point of view. How'd that happen?
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, being a coach over the years and having big challenges that I've had in my career and having to adapt and learn and grow, I've developed a way of leading and a communication style and a style of play and a clarity to who I am and how I do things. And so, look, one of the reasons I came here is because with all of that, I also felt that the player pool fit kind of the way I think about football and life. And so the combination of those things, and I think we were very careful and clear with the team about what we wanted, but they were also eager and they were also intelligent, right? So then we were able to transform, I think, the team into something that could be successful. And I one of the stories I tell is the 3rd day of training in Holland. I said to the team, we're likely to have to the staff, I said, we're likely to have a tough month, but we're going to be a good team. Like I could see the way that the players were pushing, I could see the way they were adapting, and I could see the quality that they had. So, I don't think that we would have thought that we would have kind of been able to accelerate our learning curve so quickly, but my first feelings about the group have proven to be true.
Yeah. Because it did. When did you meet? The first time you actually sat down and talked to them as a side, as a team, that was at that training camp, right, in Europe.
Yeah. But I'd gone to meet with Alphonso Davies, Kyle Larin, Jonathan David, and Alistair Johnston in that order. And I had spoken to, in those trips, I had also spoken to Stefan Estacchio. And I kind of knew that that was going to be the core of like the group that was going to be leading this going forward. And, there were a couple decisions that had to be made in there. Like, did we bring in some of the older guys that had been around or not? What was the version or vision of those people and what they have contributed, what they thought, how they were going to be essential to where we were going, and some of those conversations. And, I think one of the best decisions that I made in that was just kind of starting from scratch with a younger group and giving those players room to lead and room to take this over. And that's exactly what they've done. And it's been fun. That's what I'd say is like getting to know these guys, seeing how much they care for the national team, seeing how hard they work for each other. It's been a lot of fun.
Was there a risk in that, that kind of turning the page in that moment? Because you had guys, you had guys who had been very much a part of the, qualifying for Qatar, which was super unexpected, kind of a heroic run to get into the World Cup. Those guys have been relied on very heavily as a leadership group in terms of kind of core culture on the team. Now, that said, as I said before, like that year leading up had not been positive, and things seem to have kind of gone stale in a lot of ways. But, there's obviously opportunity, but there's also risk when you say, go play.
Well, look, man, I mean, every decision you make as a coach, there's risk reward, So, and in the end, the risk, I thought that there was a higher risk in bringing the older players back than it was in moving on without them. And that's nothing. Look, I don't even know them very well. So it's not fair necessarily to say those things because I never really even had conversations with them, because I just felt after meeting with those core players that they were prepared and they were ready, and they were mentally and that not just capable, but they were mentally ready to know that they were the future.
Yeah.
So, they, all of them, I think, have had to be teased and kind of like challenged to like, take over more and engaged in the right ways, but they've all stepped up in a really big way.
Yeah, it was, although, geez, I remember watching, you seeing the lineup that you rolled out for those first, say the Netherlands match and the France match, and the two center backs, especially the two young guys who, like that's, okay, it's, it's over the water's over your head, you got to swim.
Yeah.
That was a bold stroke.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, before I put pen to paper, what I did is I kind of researched the defensive core, right? And I wanted to. A lot of people had talking about the fact that defensively the back line, that we were missing some important pieces in terms of the potential talent and some of the older players that that probably was going to be difficult for them to be at 2026. But the more that I watched them, the more I thought, you know what, there's a lot to work with there. Moise Bombito, Derek Cornelius, and Alistair Johnston, and obviously Fonzie, but then even like Luc de Fougerolles, Richie Larea, Sam Adekugbe was hurt at that time, but I knew that there was Kamal Miller, like all these guys. I felt like I could help them, and I felt like we'd be okay. And so literally that was like the last thing on the checklist I had to do before I decided to put pen to paper. And I called Kevin Blue and I said, we're going to be fine in the back, so let's do this.
That's great. And I assume, like, obviously those guys would appreciate a fresh set of eyes too, right? That somebody's seeing them.
Well, I mean, the big thing is like I bring a certain tactical style.
Yeah.
Right. And so the big thing when you look at players in general, but certainly players in the back, is they have to have the kinds of qualities and intelligence to be able to adapt to what I'm asking from them. And, probably center back is the toughest position that in my system, but we also create a level of intelligence and urgency in the way we play and what that position requires. And you see the quick development, I think, in the way that we teach what is important in our system. And so, I think we've seen rapid, accelerated growth from the entire back line, but specifically those two center backs.
Did the guys embrace the style change, Jesse? Right off the look from a spectator point of view, it's incredibly entertaining. It's fun to watch on the front foot. fearless, aggressive, high press, all of that is a blast. But a real change, like a real shift for some of these guys.
An argument or a discussion I had with the team early on was, look, they did really well in qualifying and they were mostly a low block team that countered. And then they started to transition into more of a ball possession team, right? And there were certain tactical things that had done to try to encourage them to be better in possession. But in the process, they had given up almost all the goals they conceded were from build-up phase and from possession phase. And so, I said, look, we could continue to become a technical, tactical possession team, and we could make more progress, and we have talent in this room to do that. But what's our ceiling for something like that? I said maybe 35th, 30th in the world, something like that. I said, but if we build in more speed and power and athleticism and size and aggression, I said, then maybe we could be top 20, top 15, top 10. Dare we say, like, there's real athleticism in the team. And they kind of all looked around the room and kind of were shaking their heads and they were like, that sounds right. So it's one of the fastest teams I've ever coached. They know that. They know they have team speed. They know they're athletic. And if we can build in more and more aggression and the understanding of what to do when and how to use their qualities to benefit themselves and the team, then we can see real strong performances. We can see progression and development. And then these players will, like we've seen, will have bigger opportunities in their career to be bigger players and have big careers.
Yeah. Well, they also seem, they played with a certain kind of verve, joy during that stretch, which, like, that hadn't been apparent for a long time. Like, it's certainly from before Qatar, I would say.
Yeah.
There was a stretch where there didn't seem to be that kind of.
Look, they enjoy playing with each other. They enjoy spending time with each other. They enjoy playing for the national team. They are committed all the way. It's, when you play for your club, it's often like about a responsibility and about fulfilling your roles as a professional. And when you play for the national team, it's about living your dream and living a passion, I think. And you want it to be the best of both worlds at all moments, whether it's club or country, but there is something about playing for your country, especially when you're talking about getting ready for a home World Cup. So, it hasn't taken tons of reinforcement for me, or like in the beginning, I talked about the vision towards 2026, and now it's more, they know that, and they know we're on the right path. It's now more about setting new standards and challenging them to continue to push to be all the things that we want to be for that moment, right? So they love it. They're super engaged, and they're getting better. I feel like every day that we're together on the pitch.
What was your coming in the opportunity to coach Alphonso Davies? Who, they'd use him in all kinds of different ways, in all kinds of different positions. Yeah. Obviously, an incredibly talented guy.
Yeah.
You put him back. He's now playing for Canada, where he plays for Bayern. He's also wearing the armband.
Yeah.
Those two things, it seems to me, are significant.
Look, I knew Fonzie somewhat. We knew of each other. We had said hello, spoken quickly after matches, whether it was in MLS or in Europe, Champions League. So we had seen each other at different moments along the way. Obviously, I was a fan of his and followed him, and I was proud of him from coming from the MLS. All of us coming from MLS in Europe, we kind of have this unspoken bond. And then, once I got to know him, I was excited because I could see that he's still young. As talented he is, he's still young, and there's still a lot of room for improvement as a player and as a person and as a leader. I think by making him captain, I knew that it was an opportunity for him to put all that to practice, to put his development as a person and as a footballer to practice. And I knew that he would be the inspirational, become the inspirational leader that we need. And part of the, I went through this a little bit when I went to Austria and my German was okay. The players really wanted to help me learn German. And they when I would make mistakes, they would come to me and say, hey, coach, just so you know, we say it like this, or we do it like this, or, this is the difference between German and Germany and Austria. And it was a really cool effect. Like that, my vulnerability, I think, really drew them to me. and they wanted to help me be better in German and be thus a better communicator and better coach that way. And I think there's a real togetherness with Fonzie becoming our captain, right? I think they all look to him, they all respect him, a lot of them admire him, but they also know that he's still young and that he needs support in being the captain that they need him to be, and so they're all ready to be there for him or to fill in gaps for him or to support him in the process. And that's had a really cool effect overall on the team. You know, I think everybody really respects him and knows how good he is. They know what a great guy he is. He's really engaged in it. He's got brings a lot of energy, but everybody's there to kind of push him along and support him along the way. So it's been a really cool process, and I see him grow daily for like what we need from him.
Is it do you think, not everybody embraces that role? Was he Was there any reluctance on his part to take that on?
No. The first so like I said, he was the first one I went to go meet with, and I asked a lot of questions, and this has been sort of made public. Like I asked, what does being a Canadian mean? What does it mean to be on the Canadian national team? What's it like for you at Bayern? What are the differences between your experiences there and your experiences with the Canadian national team? And then, along the way, in my Rolodex, I had wanted at the right time to say, okay, what about captain? What do you think about being captain? And he goes, yeah, I want to be captain. It just matter of factly, immediately. And I said, why? And he explained why, and it had a lot to do with, I think, getting the most out of his teammates, but also sort of fulfilling his destiny as the heir apparent leader to what this team is. And that for me was clear, right? And so I was happy to hear that, because that's how I felt too. There's a lot of other guys, and I could. Steph is, as vice captain, is also an incredible captain. You could go down and talk about Kyle and Jonathan and Alistair and Richie and Oso and Max, and in all their own ways, they know that there's enough room within what we do as a team for them to be the leaders that they are as well. So, but their full support for Fonzie is also incredible.
Let's just step back a little bit. When you were approached about this job, or when you approached them about this job, you can tell me how that, came about.
No, they approached me, and I was like, no chance.
But what did you think you were getting into, Jesse? Again, Canada, obviously the World Cup qualification is a big deal. That had been a long, long time, since '86. There's some young talent, some really exciting talent. There'd been a tough stretch since Qatar. There'd been a lot of talk from your predecessor in this role about lack of resources, lack of depth of talent, or depth of world-class talent anyway, that there were limitations. It kind of felt like they'd backed up a bit, to be honest. And
well, these are the things that I heard as well, right? So Jason DeVos called me in November, and I was like, yeah, it's probably not in the cards, right? And then, no one was really sure who was going to take over the leadership. Allison took over for 24 hours. And so it kind of added to all of the things that made you go, what is going on there? And I just was like, there's a lot of the people think that if you coach in the Premier League, or if you coach at the Champions League at the highest level, that everything is incredibly professional and everything's aligned. And it's not the case. Like, often when you peel the veil away, you see things that are very unprofessional, lack infrastructure, lack leadership, lacking expertise. So, maybe if some people haven't been to a lot of different places, they don't know what that's like. And in the end, as a coach, you have a job that if you have a team, you know what your limitations are or what your maximum potentials are. That's all that you're focused on, is how to get the most out of every day. And there's no time for making excuses, right? It's about maximizing. And so in the end, when I evaluated where everything was at, and when I was called, I said, okay, I'll have a conversation. I had a lot of conversations. I like Kevin Blue. He's a smart guy, really smart guy. And right away, that made me think, oh boy, this is going to change, right? And I got off the phone, the first Zoom call, and I was like, are we going to go to Canada? Or is that what we're going to do? And on the follow-up conversations, and then in the official interview, I was really impressed with the organization of everything. I was really impressed with the approach. I was really impressed with the types of conversations we had, with the symmetries. Then I've said a lot, like when I knew the player pool and the potential of what they could become, the home World Cup. I mean, there was just a bunch of all of a sudden little check marks that just started, every box started getting full. And I was like, let's do this, And then once I'm in, of course, we need to fundraise for better infrastructure. We need to create a better youth system. We need to do a better job of professionalizing the first men's and women's team. We need to hire more people. We need to find more expertise. There's a lot of things we need to do, but it's also an opportunity to affect change, right? And Kevin will do that. I have no doubt. And then I think we've shown that with this team that our focus and concentration to do what is best to honor a development path for us to be really, really good is underway and has been relatively easy to put into place.
Were you between Leeds and the Canada job? Were you like, what were you thinking kind of career wise? What did you want?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I was thinking. Look, I was thinking. Retirement, literally.
Really?
Done. Because this business is brutal, right? And like the problem is that you get to the point where sometimes it's not about the work, it's about everything else, right? And so that's why I was taking my time, and whether it was club or international or maybe sport director or media or whatever, I was just trying to figure out what was driving me moving forward. And the biggest thing was the people that I work with and the ability to actually put a process into place that would actually be able to be successful. And it's crazy that this was the one, right? Because it's not like I turned down every club I spoke to, but in the past year and a half in between those two, I maybe spoke to 50 different situations. Right. And again, not like everyone said, hey, we want it, but everyone showed a pretty high level of interest. And I usually put the brakes on before it because I could just feel that it wasn't going to be right for me. But this one felt right. And again, I'm thankful every day that I made the decision because I'm enjoying this fully.
When you said you maybe were ready to go and take up a hobby and retire, that was the way the Leeds situation played out. Did that beat you up a little bit? Was that part of it?
Yes, it beat me up, but it was also just like the higher I went, the more ridiculous. And then the more that it becomes a circus, and that you're it's always like, look, as a coach and certainly as a professional coach at a high level, it's about controlling the controllables, right? There are things that are out of your control. But as long as you can kind of, work with players and a team and work with people that are above you and with you, that you feel like there's symmetry and there's commitment and there's understanding, and then you feel like you can enjoy the work. And people talk about stress. The stress wasn't that it was in the Premier League. The stress was that nothing made sense, right? And the controllables became smaller and smaller, and then it became going to the stadium in match day and not really knowing what anything was going to be. That's not fun. You want to be able to go to match day feeling like, I know what we're going to get out of our team. I know who we are. I know what we're about. We are all connected and committed. And when you do that, then you feel like, of course, the game can always go either way, but at least you feel like, you're in the right place and you're able to put a process in place that can be successful.
That's really, and again, you kind of alluded to this already, but that's not what an outsider's view of a managerial gig in a Premiership or in one of those leagues. You kind of look at that guy on the pitch and on the side and say, he knows exactly what's going on. He has full control of everything. Yeah.
It was often very chaotic, but in the process, again, I was just trying to do everything I could to be as good as I could be in the environment and create success. But I mean, look, in those kinds of moments, they also test you in every way, and you have to. And then look, the one thing about being in the Premier League is you're talking about playing against the best teams, the best players, and the best coaches, and that part is what an incredible honor and a privilege to be in that situation. But man, big challenge.
Well, big challenge, a different kind of spotlight, different kind of media pressure. Like I assume when you're coaching in Salzburg, it's it has its own kind of pressure, but
Yeah.
it's the
Well, yeah, and you're at the top of the food chain,
Yeah.
right? So like there, it's a different. Then you go to Champions League, and you're trying to now outkick your coverage or outperform what your overall potential is, But like the higher you go, and then depending on, and it's different than North American sports where it's often about parity and salary caps. And in Europe, it's like there's the haves and the have-nots, and European football. And then when you're that, and I was kind of always lucky to be in the haves. And when you're the have-nots, it's like trying to create a process of development and success is a big challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you, as an American, and again, I know you coached in Montreal, but how did you see Canadian soccer, football culture, soccer culture, from the outside?
I mean, look, when I was in Montreal, the way that I would describe it was fractured. Like lots of smaller communities like that were very protective of their own clubs and environments, and I never really got the sense that people really wanted to work together, and that the geography also challenged that togetherness. What's funny though is coming back, and I will say one of the big factors about me coming as well was that Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal committed to getting me here, which to me was a mandate, right? That like, you're the guy that we want, you're the guy that we need, you're in charge of developing the sport in this country and the national team. And that I take very seriously, and I have tried to honor it, not just by what we're doing with the first team, but how we're engaging the community, how we're engaging grassroots, how we're working with academies, how we're trying to build out a better and more robust youth national team program. Because I think that what I've learned is there is a desire to work together, but there just hasn't always been the pathways and the resources to get it done. So we're working diligently to fundraise, to create more infrastructure, Kevin on his side, me on my side, and together with the women's program to try to do something to provide a future for the sport in the country.
That was I don't know if you can shed a little bit of light or how that process worked, whether you were approached and accepted the job, and then they had to figure out how to make it work with the cooperation of those teams, or the egg came first. But it's a unique situation, and again, it's not just lip service. Like we talk about support. It's not just everybody saying, we're all for it. They actually had to reach in.
Look, I'll pull the veil back a little bit. I told South Korea I was going to be their coach. Okay. And then I was kind of, I knew that Canada was also interested, but it looked like South Korea was going to just be a good situation for me. And then things weren't, there were a couple things that didn't go quite exactly how I wanted. And then I went to Canada and I said, look, and I was pretty open. I was like, look, South Korea is interested. I've told them that I'm interested, but if we can find a way to get things to this level, then I think I'd be willing to commit to Canada. And Kevin Blue called me back in 48 hours and said, we're there. And it wasn't just about the finances of the contract. It was also about some of the structure of the way we were going to do things and the vision of what we wanted to create as a national team. And in all ways, he was committed to in the same ways that I was, right? And so again, then I was like, all right, looks like we're going to Canada. And again, I'm very, very thankful that I did.
Can I just ask you a little bit about, because there'll be some American listeners, viewers for this, but a little bit about American soccer. And again, I'm thinking about that 94 World Cup. I covered the 94 World Cup.
Okay,
It
cool.
was a watershed moment for the sport, obviously. Yeah. And, obviously MLS springs from that and all kinds of things. And I was in the World Cup in 2002 when America made the final 8, and 2010 made in the last 16. And, here we are in 2024. And, I think if you'd asked me in 2002, I would have said the United States is, I don't know if they're sure they're going to win a World Cup, but they're going to be playing in the semifinals. They're going to be competing because the sport is growing so rapidly, and and the culture is so strong, and the talent pool is enormous. That why do you think that hasn't happened?
I mean, look, that's a $1 million question, right? I think that a lot of the things, the country, the strength of the country is the overall breadth of the player pool, but the challenge of the country is the size. And it's not just geographic like it is here, it's also the spheres of influence in the sport. And so it's one of the beauties about Canada is I think like I learned that basically the population of California and Canada is almost the same, right? And now that's not as daunting a task if you think of like just that many people and that size of, it doesn't seem as big as like saying the entire United States, which is like, it's too many, again, spheres of influence to really unite under one umbrella. It's just too big of a project. Where actually, I think here we can do it. I believe it. I believe that we can, almost be a version of a Holland or a Denmark or one of these countries that's small. Okay, geographically they're smaller, but like I think that'll be our biggest challenge. But I think there's not as many people to unify, and there's not as much competing interests. And that's a big thing with the U.S. in general. It's just all these competing interests and opinions and financial situations and spheres of influence. It's the way I describe it, where I think in Canada, it's simpler from that perspective. And I think there's more of a genuine interest to be unified and together. And where I think that's something that is lacking in the U.S.
Yeah, look, Lord, there have been infrastructure issues in Canada too. There have been all kinds of, there's a long history of futility here. But watching America, it does feel like administratively, I guess, that they can't get out of their own way sometimes.
That's maybe one of the issues. And again, like people wanted to be very critical of the CSA, and in many ways there is some truth to that. But like, look, I've been trying to say, look at our player pool. This isn't by accident. Like there's a lot of good that's been happening, right? And so as much as we do want to improve a lot of the things with the infrastructure of the CSA and the breadth of the experiences for the youth national teams and our youth players, and we want to engage the community to think about developing more the ability to train at higher levels and develop players faster. And there's still a lot of good that's been done. And I think it's a lot because of the Canadian heart, the heart and kindness and generosity and commitment of the people to try to help these players to be as good as they can be. And if we can continue to use that characteristic and add more expertise and infrastructure and togetherness, then there's even bigger potential. And that's the goal.
You said at that first meeting with the players, you kind of said we could be top 10, we could be top 15. We, like the ceiling, the ceiling is maybe higher than even you guys understand. And that was before you'd ever coached them. Having had the experience with them you've had to this point, what do you think the ceiling is now?
It's a little too early to say. We know that the ceiling is we're developing, and the potential we all feel is growing, right? But we still have a lot to do. I mean, the resilience that they've shown in the tournament of Copa America. I think the first window after Copa America, where we showed it wasn't a fluke, that we picked up even better than where we left off. I think the performance against the United States specifically was very, very good. We'll have to do it again now. This is the goal. That's why it's like, are they friendlies? Yes, they're friendlies, but they're not. Like this is about like an incremental climb toward excellence. And that's the push that I have personally, and it's the demand I'm giving them on a daily basis. Like it would have been easy to go out today and even have just sort of like a training session that went through a couple things and then kind of just go through the motions. But every day I'm trying to push more and more and get more and more. And this is not about coming into the national team, enjoying the experience, and kind of sitting back because we feel good about ourselves. The better we do, the more I have to demand out of them, and that's my job.
It's been a pleasure. Really good talking to you, and look forward to that future. Look forward to seeing your side. It's been great so far. I could speak for a lot of people who fly the colors and wear the scarf. That you've already provided us some amazing moments.
The Americans, not so bad. I had somebody come up to me at the airport, and he goes, "More and more Canadian every day." That's what he said to me. I said, "You're right, man. You're right."
Yeah, we'll let you. You're welcome here.
All right, thanks, my man.
Thanks, Jesse.